Welcome to the third module in the Get Licensing Ready track, which helps you to prepare for the Software Asset Management exam 70-713, which was released in April 2017. There are 5 modules in this track, which take you through all of the topics in the exam, so let's take a look at them now. Here are the modules, and you can see some percentages aligned with each module, which show you the estimated amount of questions that there will be on each of these topics in the exam. Each module has a video to teach you the necessary topics if you're new to software asset management, and an exam to check that you've remembered the key points and can apply your knowledge to scenario-based and factual questions. Your preparation for the exam might consist of watching all of the videos and then trying out the questions, or just working through the exams to see if you have any areas of weakness. You can watch the videos at any time, of course. So what's included in the exam? The first module covers understanding what the SAM optimization model, or SOM, is, and how it's used to assess an organisation's SAM maturity. This is a great first module, since the SOM is referred to in all of the other modules. Module 2 is entitled Manage Software Licenses, and it takes you through the main activities of a SAM baseline review. So that's collecting inventory and license entitlement information and performing a reconciliation. Module 3, we'll start on this in a moment, goes into depth in some of the areas around data collection, and we'll look at topics such as ensuring completeness of data and resolving inventory discrepancies, as well as managing SAM reporting requirements. Then Module 4 is about setting up a SAM program and making SAM part of the infrastructure of an organisation. At this point, we'll look at the importance of securing executive sponsorship and funding, and then how to design, implement and maintain a SAM program, as well as creating and maintaining a SAM program improvement plan. And finally, Module 5 is about managing the software asset lifecycle, and we'll look at managing request, acquisition, deployment and retirement processes, as well as how to track consumption and how to optimize assets. But let's get started right now with the content of Module 3. So this is our third module, Coordinating Data Collection Technologies. Let's take a look at the agenda. We talked about collecting data in Module 2 when we were looking at doing hardware and software inventories, and this module allows us to go into some more detail. First of all, we'll look at how you might make sure you get as complete a set of data as possible and how to manage any discrepancies between data sources. Then we'll have a look at how to coordinate data collection between various operations groups and, having got data from these multiple sources, the different ways in which we might consolidate it. And finally, we'll take a look at what's important to consider from a reporting point of view. Let's look at some of the things that you should consider for managing data collection and ensuring that completeness of data, with of course the first priority that we gather the best quality data possible. Machine type identification is important so that you can answer questions such as why are laptops appearing in a data center inventory that might have, for instance, components of SQL Server on it. Now, it could be, of course, that a justifiable business reason for that exists, and if so, fair enough. But if not, then the SAM activities can highlight the anomaly for investigation and action. Identifying types of machines can also support device classification, perhaps dev and test or failover, etc. And so it might be that more favourable licensing terms and conditions may be applied to those devices. And its unique machine identifiers such as the computer name and the fully qualified domain name that help you to identify the machine type. For the data collection process, there may be a requirement for the installation of an agent. When we looked at the Microsoft tools in Module 2, we saw that the MAP toolkit does not require an agent, whereas System Center Configuration Manager does. If you're using a system that does require an inventory agent on devices, then this is an activity that should be done at the point of build. That prevents a potential interruption to service once a device goes into production if an agent is later found to be missing. And what of the collection schedules? Now, remembering our primary goal of making sure that our data is of the highest possible quality means that we want to scan end user devices at times when the maximum number of devices will be connected to the network. However, owners of server and data center spaces are potentially likely to request that data is gathered at times less likely to cause performance bottlenecks on the network. So often this data gathering takes place out of office hours. Indeed, some data centers might not even let inventory agents be installed on those devices. And so there are techniques such as using subcomponents of the operating system to provide inventory data. To minimize the network traffic in enterprise scenarios, demands for data may even be fed via an intermediary device, which can transmit inventory data and not threaten data center network performance. As data is gathered, both from an inventory point of view and a license entitlement point of view, there may be some discrepancies that come to light, and of course these must be resolved. We'll take a look at some of the most common ones that you might come across on this slide. First of all, watch out for Windows upgrade licenses. You may well know that the Windows desktop client licenses acquired through a volume licensing agreement are upgrade licenses. That means that if a customer license entitlement only shows these licenses, then it's not enough, since there's a requirement for an underlying qualifying license. Typically, this is an OEM license, which licenses the device to which the volume licensing license is assigned, but it should be checked that this is a pro license rather than a home license, and of course that it does exist in the first place. Also watch out for versions and editions. There are different editions of products such as Office or Visio, and the edition installed must match the license purchased. For example, if an organisation has purchased Office Professional Plus licenses, then they are not allowed to install Office Standard on devices which have those Office Professional Plus licenses assigned to them. Then there are some special use rights you need to take into account. Inventory data, for example, could show that there are PCs with multiple installations of Microsoft Office. Do we need to assign multiple licenses to those devices? Actually, referring to the product terms document confirms that any number of copies of the software may be installed on a licensed device, and thus just a single installation of Office per device can be reported. And what of secondary use rights? Office licenses acquired under a volume licensing agreement allow the software to be installed on a second device for the use of the user of the main device to which the purchase license has been assigned. Now, that might mean you can report fewer Office installations and thus need fewer licenses. However, be aware that if the software has been acquired under an enterprise agreement, then these use rights don't apply. And of course, where this can get even trickier is where negotiation or contracts team have negotiated more favourable terms. And here we would need access to these terms, and we'd then need to take them into account when reviewing discrepancies across inventory and license entitlement data. Now let's look at what we need to consider as we coordinate data collection between operations groups. This is an important task, of course, because not all of the data that is needed will be within the immediate reach of the IT team, and so facilitating data transfer and synchronization between various groups is important. For example, the full-time employee headcount will sit with HR, contract data within the contracts department, and purchase data with procurement. Recognizing where that data resides and who can grant access to it is vital. Then there's the issue of whether these teams are using the same inventories in their daily roles. And in fact, there's a SOM competency associated with this that we'll look at now. It's called the Operations Management Interfaces competency, where the key question that is asked is this: how do the various operations management functions use software and hardware inventories in their daily roles? And these functions are defined as contracts, financial fixed assets, service support, security, and networking. And if we have a look at the SOM levels for this competency, we can see that at the basic level, SAM isn't even considered across the company, while at the standardized level, each group is managing separate inventories, improving to an associated asset inventory at the rationalized level. And finally, at the dynamic level, all business units are following the same strategy, processes, and technology for SAM. Let's look at another couple of tasks that fall into this data collection category, starting with validating data between various IT groups. An example here might be comparing elements of inventory data against a trusted data source, such as antivirus software, for example. It should be possible to find a trustworthy field of data that both systems report on that can help determine the quality of the data gathered. This field could be the MAC address of a device, for example. Another possibility might be to conduct a comparison between inventory data and Active Directory. And finally, if different operations groups manage the virtualized environments or third-party resources such as Linux, it's important not to forget to collect and incorporate data from these groups. The map toolkit, for example, helps you to collect information for several different inventory scenarios, including Linux and Unix computers and VMware computers, as you can see here. So, having worked out how to get information from different groups in an organisation, the next challenge is how you consolidate data from those multiple sources. And our objective here is to produce a single view of information from potentially several different, but of course related, reports, which are probably delivered in an Excel spreadsheet format. Now, there are a couple of techniques you can use depending on the column headings on the reports that you're working with. If they're exactly the same, perhaps the reports come from different subsidiaries or departments showing the same information but for those different locations, you can simply combine the data by copying and pasting it into one report. On the other hand, when they're not the same, look for a unique field that's common to all the reports that you're working with to create a relationship between the reports so that you can generate a final report. Have a look here at two reports I might have with these fields here. The left-hand report might come from the SAM team, listing all authorized software titles, and the right-hand one from procurement, listing costs for each product. And my task is to create a single consolidated report with all of the information. The structure isn't the same, so I can't combine them. But you can see here there's a common field, the SKU. That's unique as well. The same SKU doesn't apply to different titles or vendors, for example. So in this case, I could create a relationship between these two reports based on the SKU field to create a final consolidated report of all information. And as a side note, being able to compare installation data against purchase data increasingly requires on SKUs or part numbers to be used when software is ordered. SKUs are like fingerprints for software. It allows you to identify the exact version and edition of the software being purchased, which is very handy when it comes to determining whether the deployment of that software adheres to the terms and conditions that come with that product. It's ideal if a purchasing team use SKUs wherever possible when ordering software. You can imagine perhaps how unhelpful it is to receive purchasing data that just has a single line item of Microsoft software $100,000 rather than those individual SKU lines. Our final topic in this module takes a look at the reporting requirements within a SAM project. First of all, there will be a need for general user and executive reports, and it's important to understand what the requirements for these reports will be. And for this task, thinking about who and what, where, when and why will help considerably. So, who wants the reports? Do they have the permission and/or authority to ask for the information they're requesting? What information do they want? A CFO may be interested in numbers and money. A CIO might want summary information, whereas an IT manager or a SAM manager may want the detail, and functional groups like procurement may want only purchasing information. It's important to check that the information can actually be generated. It's often surprising what people's perception is of what SAM reporting can give. Where will the data come from? If it concerns the Paris office, then the data will likely come from there, but do you have access to that information? The when is about SLAs, and it's important that they're agreed for the turnaround of any agreed reports. And finally, the why. Why is this information needed? Asking this simple question could identify that it's not a report that can come from the SAM function. or perhaps it will help to qualify the information needed to generate the results, or even that the person asking for this report doesn't have the rights to ask for it. As well as the general reports, it's important to generate and maintain periodic reports. This helps to remind people of the SAM team's existence. Otherwise, they might be reliant on a periodic ELP generation to be the sole means by which the business knows what they're doing. There will also be ad hoc reporting requests, and it's important to make sure that these can be addressed in a structure that provides a reasonable turnaround time and that a priority rating can also be factored into the request system. That will mean that if a particular report requested carries significant business weight, then it can be moved up the reporting ladder and generated sooner than less important reports. And the final point here is about generating reports for software publishers. While it's important, of course, to be able to generate these reports, it's equally important to ensure that a recognised protocol is in place with a management structure to validate such requests. As usual, at the end of a module, let's summarise by reviewing the exam topics that you will be tested on. Firstly, there will be questions on how you get as complete a set of data as possible, and we considered scanning schedules and being able to identify machine types, for example. We also looked at how to manage any discrepancies between different data sources, where particular licensing terms may need to be taken into consideration or a particular use for a device. Then you need to know how to coordinate the collection of data from different operations groups, and we saw that the ease of this is dependent on how mature the organisation is in the operations management interfaces competency. We also looked at validating data by comparing different relevant data sets. The next area is consolidating that information, and we looked at the techniques of combining data and using a common field to create a relationship between two reports to create a third. And finally, from a reporting point of view, we looked at managing reporting using who, what, where, when and why to get the right reports to the right people with the right information at the right time. That concludes our third module in the 70-713 exam preparation track. Your next task should be to take the short test associated with this module to check that you've understood and remembered the key points and that you can apply your knowledge to scenario-based and factual questions. Then join me on the next module, which you can see is entitled Design and Manage a SAM Program, and is about setting up a SAM program and making SAM part of the infrastructure of an organisation. We'll look at the importance of securing executive sponsorship and funding, and then how to design, implement and maintain a SAM program, as well as creating and maintaining a SAM program improvement plan.